Hi, I'm Sheryl McCutcheon, Title I Parent Coordinator at Spencer Elementary School. Here with me today is Mr. Steve Goffreda, Director of Student Services and Attendance for Roane County Schools, and of course former Superintendent of Roane County Schools. Mr. Goffreda is here today to discuss school attendance. Mr. Goffreda, why is regular school attendance so important?
Well, to begin with, in order to really reap the benefits of an education, a student really needs to be in school every day that they possibly can, with keeping absences to a minimum. And the research shows that there is a high correlation between student attendance and student achievement. The students that attend the most regularly generally do better in school. They generally have a more positive outlook about everything, usually a better disciplinary record. And the most effective schools in the United States seem to have one thing in common: they all have good attendance. So I think it's pretty obvious that coming to school matters. Now, the opposite of that would be you'd do better if you weren't there, which would kind of be
Doesn't really make sense.
Contradictory. It would make no sense at all. That would be like saying you're better fed if you don't eat.
Well, and you can't learn if you're not there in school, right? So
correct. And it's also the law. It's the legal responsibility of parents and guardians, if their student is under the age of 18, to make sure that they go to school. And once the student becomes age 18, they're responsible for their own attendance, and they can be held legally responsible. There's actually a set of state laws that require students to attend school.
okay, well, that kind of leads us into the next question. What are the requirements for parental notes or doctor notes after there is an absence?
Well, to keep it as simple as possible, whenever a child is absent from school, they should return the next day with some kind of documentation explaining why. Now, the most preferable documentation would be a doctor's note or something from the medical facility showing that they had a legitimate medical appointment or that a doctor excused them from being in school. Those are the best forms of documentation.
Right.
However, you don't always go to a doctor, and there may be times where you really don't need to, even though you aren't feeling well. Well, in Roane County and in a lot of school districts, parents are also allowed to write notes as documentation. In Roane County, a parent can excuse up to 5 absences per semester.
Okay.
So that takes a little bit of the pressure off parents to have to go to a doctor every time a child is sick, and that also prevents it from being abused.
Right.
Now, there's also the requirement that a parent can only write a note to excuse no more than 3 consecutive absences. If a student is going to be absent more than 3 days in a row, then the thinking is they better see a doctor.
Yeah, if they're that sick that they need to miss that much school, they should definitely be at the doctor.
Right, and this regulation is really a protection to the students too, because otherwise, people could just write notes and say Johnny was sick, Johnny was sick, Johnny was sick, and it would be erroneous.
Right.
So this is the way, there's kind of a checks and balances, and it's very fair.
Okay. Now, what happens if a child misses several days of school, and it appears that some of the absences may be unexcused? I think we covered that a little bit, but can you expand on that?
All right, well then we're into new territory. If the absences are unexcused, meaning they're not submitting the documentation to show that the absences were legitimate, there's a set of steps that happen, and the end result can be court action. But it usually starts with a letter from the school, a polite, professional letter from the school, telling the family that there's an attendance problem. And we like to think of this as a verification letter, to give the family an opportunity to verify the absences, see if there's any documentation that hasn't been turned in yet. A lot of times parents send notes with kids and they don't get to school. They end up in their backpacks and their lockers and whatever. And this exposes that so that the parents can tell them, make sure you get that note into school, or it lets the parents know if something is missing. Now, if the principal's office can get that attendance issue settled with just that letter from the school, it can end there. And usually they go after the cases where there are about 5 or more unexcused absences. And there's actually a state law to that effect. Now, if that doesn't solve the problem, then the case can be referred to the county attendance director, who functions as what used to be called the truant officer. In
Okay.
fact, some people still call the attendance director the truant officer. All right, well then, we generate a notice to the family, and it's a more ominous, spooky notice. This is
That's
a
kind of like your second warning, you know, we need to get serious about this kind of note,
Yeah,
right?
it's very serious because it even tells what the consequences are, you know, what the fines might be, the possibility of jail, and it basically directs the parent or legal guardian or parents or legal guardians in to meet with the school to get this attendance issue settled. It's like one more chance to get this settled. Now, when those cases come up to the attendance officer, sometimes other interventions take place. For example, we can do a home visit. Let's say we visit a home and the child is at home and they're supposed to be in school. The attendance director or truant officer can actually take the child without a warrant
Wow.
and have them placed in school. And that's something that it's kind of exclusive to the truant officer. Whereas, you know, like the city police or the sheriff's department or the state police, you know, they'd have to have a warrant. But there's actually a law to make it easier for the school district to get a child back in school. And sometimes we have to use that.
I was going to say, does that happen very often?
Not that often, but it's happened before. But most of the time when we have to go into the home and take a child out, the parent has called and asked for help first. It's
Okay.
very, very rare that we have to go in and remove a child where the parent doesn't want to cooperate with us. Most of the time, they're having trouble getting the child to go to school.
So does this happen with like older kids? Because when I think of kids, my own kids are in elementary school, so I think of that set. Is this
you would
mostly
think
with
that
the
way,
older?
but I had to go after a kindergarten student during the 2011-2012 school year, and I had to go there more than
Wow.
once. So I mean, it ranges from, it can be, you know, as young as kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. So there really is no particular age.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a boy or a girl, because we've had issues with both.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what if the student is already 18 years old?
If the student is 18 years of age, they're responsible for their own attendance, and therefore they can be held accountable in the legal system.
Okay.
Now-
Because they're legally an adult at that point and are responsible for their own actions, correct?
That's correct. And I probably should mention what happens when we get beyond the letter stage, and that could be filing a criminal complaint in magistrate court, which is filed against the parents or legal guardians of the child if they are under 18.
Okay.
They're filed against the student if they are 18.
18.
And the fines are somewhat expensive, and we may talk about that a little bit later.
Okay. All right, so what counts as an excused absence in Roane County?
All right, well, there's actually a list, and if you want, I could review the list with you.
Yeah, if you don't care,
Yeah.
let's go over the list there, just so that the people watching this know for sure.
All right, these are all considered excused absences. Illness or injury of the student with a doctor's written verification, a medical or dental appointment that cannot be scheduled outside of the school day with a doctor's or dentist's written verification, illness of the student verified in writing by the parent, but that can't exceed 3 consecutive days.
Okay.
If they're out 3 days, then they need to go to the doctor, because we're figuring if they're that sick, they really should see
Yeah.
a doctor. Or a total of 5 days per semester. And in you know, that case, we're being pretty lenient because some school districts only say 5 parent notes a year.
Yeah.
We say 5 per semester because we realize it's expensive to go to the doctor
Yeah.
all the time. And some years are worse than others. We may have a year where everything's just fine, and then there are other years where people get decimated by the flu and these strange viruses that come in and out. So far, this has been a good year. I
Yeah.
hope it stays
Yeah, I
that
think
way.
it has.
Last year was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Now, once they go beyond 5 parent notes per semester, then a doctor's note is required
Okay.
for every absence due to illness after that. Another excused absence would be illness or injury in the family when the student absence is verified in writing as being essential by a doctor. For example, let's say there's some serious illness in the family, and because of that, the student is needed there to help care for someone. Then there is that provision. Another area that would be considered excused would be a calamity such as a home fire, a flood, or some other kind of emergency where the principal says, yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Death in the family is another excused absence with a limit of 3 days, except for extraordinary circumstances. And then our board policy explains what would constitute a relative, who would family members be, like mother, father, brother, sister, all the different family members that are approved. Another area that's excused absences would be educational leaves. Sometimes someone may come up with a proposal to be away from school, let's say to visit a college campus. We're fine with that. If the principal approves it and if the teachers say it's okay to be away, as long as the students make up their work and they complete some kind of an educational plan to show what they learned, we can grant that as educational leave. And then we don't usually even deduct it as an absence if it's something like as if they're on a field trip.
Okay.
Early dismissals, and maybe even some tardies, if it's for something like ongoing special medical care or psychiatric or psychological assistance or counseling. Some students have to go to regular counseling sessions. We're okay with that too, as long as they come back with their notes.
Right.
Extracurricular activities. Sometimes students are dismissed early, let's say to go to
Basketball game, something like that.
any kind of sports activity that's approved by the school. Legal obligations, such as if someone is subpoenaed to appear in court and the child has to be there too. Failure of a bus to run. All right, if we have inclement weather and the transportation system is compromised and some bus doesn't complete its route, if they can prove that that route was not completed, then they can be excused for that. And I don't believe we even deduct for that because it's almost like school was closed for them. They had no way to get there. Religious holidays, observance of special religious holidays, in some cases that might constitute an excused absence for some people. And also some extenuating circumstances that might require home hospital instruction. And that would be due to some kind of illness or injury that's pretty serious that might warrant them being out of school for a long period of time.
So that's a pretty extensive list.
Yeah, it's very fair.
Yes.
But it's hard to believe that you still end up with a lot of people with a lot of unexcused absences. For example, we just did an audit of one particular building, and we were generating warning letters and came up with 105 of them.
Wow.
And it's only December. And in this case, we were looking for students that had 10 or more unexcused absences.
And we haven't even been in school for 100 days yet, right?
Well, I know it's only been 4 school calendar months, so it's probably like about 80 days. So, that just shows you that some of the notes aren't getting to school. Now, some people might not like receiving these letters, but it's a way to keep them out of court, because if they pay attention to the letters and they get the documentation in and then the attendance improves, then their case goes to the bottom of the pile.
Right.
It's when people ignore the letters that we run into problems.
And I saw some of those fines on there, and they can be pretty steep fines.
Yes, for a first offense. Now, for a first offense, they take all the absences and combine them into one offense. Now, just one offense, it's a misdemeanor, and the fine is $50 to $100 plus prosecution costs. Now, someone might say, oh, $50 to $100, that's not too bad. Well, the prosecution costs aren't that good.
Oh, yeah.
The prosecution costs are now $165.25. It used to be $165.80, so you save a few coins now, but that's still a lot of money. So you're talking about your first visit to magistrate court, it could cost between $215.25 and $265.25, depending on if the judge goes with the high fine or the low fine.
And that's for the first offense.
That's the first offense. Now, most people stop there. They don't want to go back
I would hope
again.
so.
Would hope. Now, for a second offense, they can actually count each individual absence as a separate offense. So let's say someone has 10, they could be charged 10 times. So then we're talking about possibly $2,650, and you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Send your kids to school.
Yeah, it's better to send your kids to school. And also, and this doesn't happen very often in our county, but I know of at least one time, maybe more than once, back in the 90s, I remember a judge actually sentenced the parent to have to go to school too, which to me that'd be worse than jail. And they can do that. They can require the parent to accompany the child to school. Because if the child's refusing to go, they'll say to the parent, okay, you're responsible, you take them, you stay with them all day, and you attend school too.
That would be punishment enough for the student to say, okay, I'll go to school, I don't want my mom or dad here with me.
Yeah, I would not want my parents taking me to school and sitting next to me in school. And there's also the possibility of jail, 5 to 20 days in jail per offense in the second offense.
And that can add up too.
Right. So once again, let's say we have 10 unexcused absences, that could be 200 days in jail. That's the extreme case.
Right.
It's rare that we get to that point, but I think it's important for people to know that's in the law book.
Yeah.
That actually is a state law.
So that's not just something that Roane County has in place. So.
No, people think sometimes that we invented all of this. We didn't. This is for all 55 counties, and different counties enforce it in different ways. This county's pretty strict, fair but strict. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing I think we should mention is while most of these regulations are geared towards the parents or the student, it's also illegal for someone who's not related to talk them into staying home. Like, let's say an adult goes up to a kid and says, hey, you don't have to go to school today. I'll let you stay home here and you can just watch movies or play video games or watch cartoons or whatever you want. Your parents are at work. They'll never know. You're welcome to. Well, if they get caught, they can be charged too, and they can be fined $20 to $50 plus prosecution costs. And for just one offense, they can be put in jail for 10 to 30 days. I think that's even more serious than if the parent's not sending them, because you have someone is trying to talk someone else's kid into not going to school. To me, that's pretty serious.
If you have an uncle or a friend of the family that's telling the kid not to go to school.
Right, and I know of a case where we had to do that, and we had to send the city police into an apartment, and we took care of it.
Okay, well, I think we talked about the fines for truancy, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and do many attendance cases have to go to magistrate court, or?
Not that many. We had quite a few a couple years ago, and that was just because we were, really cracking down. And it's gotten a little bit lighter now because people are getting more accustomed to the regulations. But fortunately, most parents and legal guardians follow the laws, and most of them pay attention to the warning letters, and most of them pay attention to the conferences. And so that helps keep people...
So it doesn't have to go that far.
Right. Now, I'd like to throw out there, too, sometimes people take it the wrong way, and they will say, well, if my child's going to be charged here, or I'm going to get charged, then they're going to just drop out. Well, that's even worse, because if they're under the age of 18, we can actually put them before a circuit judge, because dropping out doesn't make all that go away.
Right.
It's just like if somebody was speeding with their car over and over again, and they think they're going to get caught, getting rid of the car and changing cars doesn't make it go away. So dropping out's even worse. And when we find out that someone's planning, it's just a little secret between you and your television audience, if we find that someone's planning to do that, we put their case at the top of the pile, because it's hard to improve someone that drops out.
Right.
So we're much more strict with someone that's not going to finish school. We want people to graduate.
Absolutely. Okay, what should I do if I have questions about my child's attendance?
Well, first of all, you'd start by contacting the child's teacher. That's a real good starting point. The school office, the principal, assistant principal, or a secretary. Most of the offices, the secretaries have a lot to do with the attendance program. And if need be, the county attendance officer, and that'd be myself at the Board of Education office, and we're at 304-927-6413.
Okay.
And it's very, very important to get on this right away, not only because of the fines, but it's also possible for a child to be removed from the home for truancy in some extreme cases. While we talked about magistrate court, there's also circuit court. Now, let's say a student is refusing to go to school and the parent's not doing anything about it, or let's say the parent even just wants help because the student's not listening to the parent. A juvenile petition can be filed as a status offender case, and the student can be charged, and then one of the circuit judges will give an order to the child to attend school regularly with no unexcused absences, or the child can be removed from the home and placed in a foster home or a residential facility, or in some cases, in extreme cases, a detention center.
So they can be charged as a juvenile if they're under 18, is that what you're saying?
Under 18, yes. If they're over 18, then we handle it through magistrate court.
Okay.
Now, the other thing is, when a juvenile does something in school, it may be handled with a suspension, and they might be charged as a status offender or a juvenile delinquent because of what they had done. Like, let's say, getting into lots of fights, attacking people, whatever. But then, if they do what the judge says, that can be removed from their record once they turn 18. If an 18-year-old does the same things, it's a little bit different. An 18-year-old that's disrupting school property by creating havoc in the school can actually be arrested and sent to the Central Regional Jail.
And charged as an adult.
And charged as an adult. So, once again, it's very important to take all these regulations seriously. And the other thing I think that parents need to be aware of is that there's also something called educational neglect. Now, usually the cases are handled in magistrate court, but in some extreme cases it can be brought before a circuit judge, and if it's ruled that there's been educational neglect, they can remove the child from the home and put them in a foster home because the parents are refusing to send them to school. A lot of people don't know that either, and it's just good to know that. And I'm not wanting to scare anyone. It's just better to know what the laws are.
Absolutely.
It's just like when you take your driver's test. What's the first thing they do is they make you learn everything in that driver's manual.
Before they put you in the car.
Right. They're not trying to scare you. They want you to know what the rules are before you get on the road.
Right.
Well, it'd be nice if we did that with everyone before they had kids, but we can't. So that's why we're doing this today.
Well, good. Well, I think that about covers it. Do you have any finishing thoughts or comments that you'd like to get out there?
Well, just that we appreciate all the cooperation we get. Most parents really are extremely cooperative and sincere, and you would be amazed at how many cases we have where after we get involved with them legally, they do rise to the occasion and improve. More cases than not, when we have a student before a circuit judge, when we go back for our review hearings, we're giving really, really good reports, and the judge is very, very proud of how they're doing. We had one case earlier this year where there was a student who had a really bad attendance record, some disciplinary infractions, and there was a danger of dropping out. And now the student has raised their GPA up above 2.0. I'm not sure how up above it, but it was enough to make the high school basketball team.
Well, good.
So now this same student is someone we all look up to, a role model. And this was a student that, a year ago, we were in a different situation. So it shows that some of these interventions can work, and we really like the stories to have happy endings.
Yes, very good. Okay, well, thank you for being my guest today, Mr. Goffreda. I appreciate you taking the time to come talk about the attendance laws, and I think it's been very informative for our parents and everyone else watching. I do have a few news items to report for Spencer Elementary School. The first grade Kids Hot Chocolate is scheduled for Friday, December 13th, and it is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So make plans to attend if you have a student in first grade. Parents are asked to park in the lower parking lot and to report to the Title I room. for a brief presentation by Lisa Alfred, the Roane County Literacy Coach. Ms. Alfred will be discussing the new WordWorks spelling techniques and how you can help your child with their spelling tests. Rowan General Read Aloud for second grade students will be on December 18th, so be sure to sign your child up for that. And the Spencer Elementary School 7th Annual Reading Fair will be January 9th, 2014. If you have not already done so, please fill out the red application for the reading fair and return it to the school by December 18th. Display boards will be provided to all participating students free of charge. Well, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful and safe holiday season. This show has been hosted by A&M Digital Technologies.